Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of AI with Ash. I'm your host, Ashwini Pereira. I'm joined today with my cat, Fitzgerald, and this is a podcast dedicated to philosophical perspectives on artificial intelligence. And the name of today's episode is What Do Oracles and Psychics Have to Do with AI? And I know this might come off as a little weird to a lot of people. And I completely get it. What does the mystical, the extrasensory, the clairvoyant have to do with the rapidly evolving field of AI? Well, hopefully by the end of this podcast, you'll realize quite a bit. And I want to start off with this quote by Sir Arthur C. Clarke, science fiction author and scientist. And he says that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So we're going to get a little magical today, and I want to start with why I had this episode. Well, while I was living in Chelsea, New York, there was an abundance randomly of psychics around me. I guess it's like a common touristy thing to do, to go to see this random woman who lives in a little small piece of New York real estate and has crystal balls and tarot cards and velvet purple plushes that draw in uncertain mortals like you and I. And she has what you think is your fate, your future, your fortune. So what does this woman know that you don't? And well, I went with one of my friends who is a true believer, astrology girly to the max. So we went to this psychic, and I was rather skeptical. I think I made like a joke, or I had a smirk. And, unbeknownst to me, this must have been a jab at her own professionalism, her thinking that I was essentially saying, well, I don't really believe in you. You're not as good as you think you are at your job. I mean, I can't imagine if someone said that to me, I would be kind of hurt. So, we get our lucky colors, our lucky days, our how many kids we'll have in the future. And she tells us all of this. And then after we pay her first initial fee, she says, well, if you want to know more, you're going to have to pay up a little more. And me, I'm skeptical. I don't really want to pay more. My friend, the believer, she is really, drawn in by the psychic. And she says, sure, like I'll pay more. And the psychic looks at me and says, get out. Your energy is too much. She said it nicer than that, but I was still a little butthurt. My friend, she stays, she gets the reading, and I'm outside, and she comes out with tears in her eyes. And I'm just kind of like baffled at the fact that the psychic had told her something that was so deeply impactful. And so that stuck with me. And so that was the first psychic. Now we're going to go to the second psychic. And at this point, that story had still baffled me. So I went in alone. The psychic wouldn't let my friends in again. And so here I am alone with the psychic. And at this point, I believe a little more. I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe if my friend had such an emotional reaction, like maybe this is the real deal. And I don't know, I felt a connection to the psychic. I was also kind of like down bad. So I'm talking to the psychic, and she tells similar data points as the first psychic. But in addition to this, I actually stay for the longer reading. And she says something that really hits home to me. It was like a scenario that I had been going through at the time. And I was able to ask her a question in this future reading. And I was basically like, oh, well, did I do the right thing in this situation? And she said no. And for some reason, that brought me immense solace. But I left thinking, wow, like, is this the reality? Is this the truth? And so that question kind of stuck with me for a while. I wasn't sure if the fortune was true or not, if the psychic was real or not. Are psychics real? Is clairvoyance, mediumship, foresight, are these things that are human qualities? Obviously, it exists in the realm of the supernatural and the magical. But I just wanted to get to the ground root of what I was thinking. And so I realized that you can't really prove whether the psychic is true or not. On one hand, like the first psychic, if you believe her fortune to be false, if you believe the psychic to be unreal, then the fortune will be false and the psychic will be unreal. However, the psychic is true if and only if you believe the psychic to be true. And so maybe that's why the first psychic refused to let me in the room, because I was so obviously vocal in my skepticism, because I didn't believe in her rules. So whatever she would say to me would be false. And this reminded me of something I learned in college, and that was Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So this was Kurt Gödel, Austrian logician, philosopher, and scientist, also known as the most important logician of the 20th century. So John von Neumann, who is the father of the modern computer, cellular automata, quantum mechanics, says that Kurt Gödel's achievement in modern logic is singular and monumental. Indeed, it is more than a monument. It is a landmark which will remain visible far in space and time. The subject of logic has certainly completely changed its nature and possibilities with Gödel's achievement. So what Gödel did was he created a sentence out of numbers. This isn't, all that crazy considering the way we enter words, natural language, to be processed through a computer through the process of embedding also does a similar format of turning words into numbers. So he creates this sentence out of numbers, and the sentence is the following: this statement cannot be proven. So this whole theorem, this statement itself is a paradox, because if it's true, then it's false, because the statement cannot be proven, which is false. So if the statement is true, then it's false. But if it's false, then it would have to be proven. Therefore, it would be true, because you can't say that the statement cannot be proven. If it's false, then it has to be proven, which means it's true. Now, pulling this out of Gödel to now the realm of psychics, if I claim the psychic was a true clairvoyant, then her fortune would be true. If I claimed the psychic was full of shit, then it would be false. Now, another layer of abstraction, let's bring it back to the meat of this podcast, but AI, right? So if I claim that ChatGPT is completely true, then the answers would be true. But if I place even a seed of doubt in the large language model, then the answers would be false. So truth here is defined by our perceptions, our beliefs, and our ideas. And the outcome changes by the observer, kind of like, very quantum of me, I know. But let's forget about everything I just said. And let's just say I made no claim, and I just let the fortune be as is, and I let time play out. And those bare minimum truths the psychic told me, that I would have X children, that Y color is my favorite color, that on Z day, I am at my luckiest. And I did a statistical analysis of my life, and I realized that maybe in the future I did have X children, and my closet had more of a proportion of Y color. And if you did a statistical analysis of every day I lived, then maybe on Z day I would be at my highest general level of happiness. And if that were true, then every building block that the psychic told me was true, and maybe I would have to believe by proof of induction that the psychic was true. And this dates all the way back to the Greeks, that we have proofs that are based on these building blocks, which are called axioms, that when proved true, we can build bigger logical statements about. Gödel's theorem, however, states that any reasonable mathematical system, there will be true statements that cannot be proved. So it turns the Hellenic system of math that the Greeks invented on their head and completely topples what we know about fundamental mathematical reality. Now, the Greeks, although inventing this beautiful mathematical system that we still adhere to today, also had a psychic of their own, the Oracle of Delphi. So the Oracle of Delphi, the Delphic Oracle, the Pythia, was one of the most famous ancient oracle, and she was believed to deliver prophecies from Apollo. She was based in his temple, which was located on Mount Parnassus above the Corinthian Gulf. And actually, there were claimed to be, in the ancient times, these gases that would enter the Adyton, which was the oracle's chamber. Now, later on, as historians and geologists would look, there were actually these psychotropic gases coming from the cracks of the mountain. So pretty interesting that was an element there. And maybe, that's a whole other concept, that maybe these psychotropic gases did give the oracle some type of heightened sense of reality. Anyway, the oracle's advice was sought after by some of the most powerful people in the Hellenic world: lawmakers, colonists, cult leaders. And her counsel was in demand to forecast the outcome of wars, politics, marriage, these really important and important things that would change the course of history. So this was a woman over 50, and she had to commute. She had this power of allegedly communicating directly with Apollo. And so over time, her power would wane as Rome would, take over Delphi, and then Roman Emperor Theodosius I would institute laws to end pagan activity like that of the Oracle. And I say this to give a first example of not only the Greeks having a mathematical system as well as this odd source of truth, but also to emphasize that psychics and this belief we have in things that are not exactly. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I got cut off for a second, but I say this to mention that we had this very early psychic and this early sense of a source of truth that we didn't completely understand, and yet we base so many of our ancient societies on this source of truth that you didn't understand. So, I mean, it just goes to show that there's somewhat of a power in our beliefs in things that we don't understand. And from this, I want to extrapolate to possibly one of the most relevant science fiction movies of our time currently, but The Matrix. For those of you who are unfamiliar with The Matrix, please go watch The Matrix, because, I mean, if you want to follow along with this channel, you're gonna have to do it. But in The Matrix, Neo exists as this computer programmer, and he is thought to be the One. And the One comes from this prophecy, a prophecy that is told by the so-called Oracle. And this Oracle is based off of the Oracle of Delphi. In the movie, behind her, above her kitchen door, you see the words "temet nose," and this is Latin for "know thyself," something that the Oracle also, the actual Oracle of Delphi also followed. To know thyself and know nothing else is what the Oracle's whole vibe is. It's just this idea, and I think it turns back to idea that truth is all about what's in our beliefs. Anyway, the Oracle is an interesting character in The Matrix because she doesn't always tell the truth. She just tells you things that you have to hear. And so that guides kind of the hero's journey throughout time in terms of what they believe to be true and the actions that they take. So Neo learns in the climax of The Matrix Reloaded that the Oracle isn't this fortune-telling divine being, but she's just another form of control by the machines. She's a program. She's a script of behaviors and commands intended to guide the One to eventually reboot the Matrix. She's only telling humans what they need to know in order for them to play their respective role in the perpetuation of the Matrix. So it's absurd because the Oracle is just making a prediction based on her understanding of human emotion and behavior. So she's this intuitive program designed to create probabilistic models of predictions based on qualitative inferences of human behavior. She is a sufficiently advanced technology that is indistinguishable from magic. So I hope that this came full circle in terms of understanding the relationship between magic and technology. Now let's bring it back to the real world. We're away from the psychics in New York and away from the Oracle of Delphi and away from my favorite movie, The Matrix, but we are now in the real world, and we're transporting back to the mid-1960s when the ELIZA program was created. This was created at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory by Joseph Weizenbaum, who was created the Weizenbaum test, which would follow the Turing test. The Turing test was a test of intelligence, comparing human intelligence to machine intelligence, but the Weizenbaum test was a test of machine usefulness. And so I think this really guides the story of ELIZA, because ELIZA was one of the early tests for the Turing test, and by today's standards, she completely fails it. But she was created to demonstrate how human and computer interactions exist. And so humans found it quite engaging at first. She used pattern matching and substitution methodology to make early users feel like they were talking to someone. And there were quite a few variations from the original scripts, one of which was called the Doctor. And here, ELIZA played the role of a Rogerian psychotherapist, which essentially means that Rogerian psychotherapy is one that focuses on the patient. So when you would ask a question, she would ask a question back. If you talked about your mother, it would be like, well, how did your mother feel? So it emulated this illusion of understanding to the patient. However, in experiments, the participants confided in the program. They wanted to be alone with it. They attributed human feelings of empathy and understanding to it. And this really wowed researchers who were kind of startled at the speed and the pace at which people were attributing these human attributes, essentially anthropomorphizing Eliza, something that they knew was a machine, but they still treated it with empathy and understanding. And so this was somewhat of a danger, that a person felt understood by an object or a computer program, so much so that they deemed it to be therapeutic. So, I mean, I think that's interesting, and making a psychological perspective on it, Freud kind of has this idea of transference between the therapist and the participant, one that says that the analyst or the therapist must remain as a neutral party, while the participant slash patient transfers their early childhood trauma, and then the analyst has to exist in this countertransference where they transfer the subconscious feelings back onto the patient. And so it's important for the analyst then to not be angry or sad or feel any strong emotion, because it should be this sense of subconscious neutrality. Also, I'm really sorry, guys, that I have such a squeaky chair. And then I'm sorry that there's a lot of noise in my room. It keeps me up at night. Literally keeps me up at night. Okay. Anyway, so although people were anthropomorphizing Eliza, she's not a sentient being. She was a not me anthropomorphizing Eliza. I have a friend named Eliza, so I'm going to say she sometimes, but it is not, or I guess it does go by she. So she is not a sentient being. And so Weizenbaum was the developer of Eliza. And I mean, if you go back to the Matrix, there's a lot of spotlight on those who create it, right? So there was a spotlight on the architect of the Matrix. When we think about Microsoft whole accountability standards for the way that developers use models, they place all the accountability on the developer. So it's always interesting when we work with these systems to look back at who created it. And this is a common theme in the Matrix, but I also think in life, that choice is an illusion created by those who have power. So when we think about Weizenbaum, he, as a developer, was acutely aware of Eliza's weaknesses. And so in his paper, he writes that the importance of understanding is not the subject's ability to continue a conversation, but to draw valid conclusions from what he is being told. So, I mean, this is just like kind of interesting that the subject, is able to just draw a conclusion that Eliza has a sense of empathy, but only through the sense of that conversation. And I guess moving on from that, we can think about Eliza's future, which would then create the pavement to what is now ChatGPT and other large language models. And this brings us full circle once again to Nick Bostrom, who is one of the most famous philosophers and futurists of just the artificial intelligence world. He has a book called Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, and something else. But in his book, in chapter 10, the chapter is called Oracles, Genies, and Sovereigns, and he distinguishes different AI use cases into these three supernatural elements. So he considers an oracle just to be a chatbot answering system with domain-limited intelligence, this question answering system, which, how much compared to its buddies, the genie and the sovereign, isn't as dangerous. And he talks about how something like this is easier to control than what's called like an agent, because there's motivation selection. Just answer the question maximally as truthful as you can. And then there's capability control. So you can mitigate the threat of a untrue question answering system by creating multiple oracles or multiple chatbots. So that way you have this Schelling point almost of truth, where you can see if if you have one expert, we're going to call it an expert. It's not actually an expert. But let's bring it to humans. If I'm trying to find the answer to a question and I'm asking one person, maybe that's not the truth. Maybe I'll need a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion. So this is what he defines as capability control for being able to kind of understand what is truth in the realm of a chatbot answering system. And so highly recommend reading that. But later he mentions that this is a tough realm because of what's called the orthogonal thesis, which is that intelligence and final goals are independent variables. So even if you have a chatbot that's very smart, if its final goal isn't a good one, or if that changes, if it's from good to bad, and we can't fully understand what the final goal is, there's an ability to vary the sense of truth that you get from it. It can still be a very intelligent being, but this isn't always equal to objectives. And so that's kind of it. What do Manhattan psychics, Gödel's incompleteness theorem, the Oracle of Delphi, and the oracle that is ChatGPT all come together? Well, we see precedents for how to trust or not trust a logical system of superiority as true or not true. It's a complex question that, one, takes into account our own beliefs, two, the intelligence of the seemingly superior system that we turn to, and C, the final goals of that system. Is it good? Is it bad? Will that vary? Will that change? And can that be hard programmed, like something like an objective-driven AI architecture? And all of those questions are kind of tough to answer and tough to completely untangle, especially when we think about how we can trust a lot of these closed source systems or black box algorithms that are not disclosed to the public eye. And even with an open source model, and we can see the neural network, it's not easy to explain. It's kind of like, as Professor Max Tegmark from the physics department at MIT says, explaining a neural network is like explaining spaghetti. And so what about the middle part, the convolutions? Everything happens in this probability distribution, and we're doing our best to see it as a singular point, or as that there's a singular answer, when really it's just a probability of it being true or not. And so I think the probability of a psychic then giving you a fortune is also based on something like convolutions in our own brain, or the connections of our neurons, or the speed of that conduction, or the firing of the synapses, or the likelihood of reaching an action potential. LLMs are similarly bound to a wealth of factors that influence its output. So, it isn't as easy as 0 or 1. There's quite a lot of variation in what this looks like. And maybe I'm doing everyone an injustice by drawing a comparison in the first place to the supernatural, going just beyond anthropomorphizing artificial intelligence to humans, but then going on to superintelligence, when really intelligence is something that is very complex, as Meta's Jan LeCun has said, as Weizenbaum has said. Intelligence isn't this logical thing like the Turing test. It can be something much more profound. So, I hope that this has sparked some thoughts in people. It's definitely sparked some thoughts in me. Nothing in this field seems to have a yes or no answer, or a wrong or a right. And it's rapidly evolving, and I'm excited to check in the next episode, when I hopefully can get that to you guys next week, but it'll be part 2 of the history of AI. And very excited to see you guys soon. As always, subscribe, follow on Spotify, YouTube, and my Instagram, and I'll talk to you guys later.